Hey everybody, good morning and welcome to Spring Cleaning for your stale digital content. So today we're going to talk a little bit about basically this, how to use spring cleaning. We're going to talk about the Marie Kondo method, honestly, take a little cue from that new show on Netflix to explore how we can use that to get rid of some of the email lists, blogs, social media accounts, all of this digital clutter, digital content that's kind of taking up space in our minds and organizations. So let's get started. I'm going to kick things off with a quick introduction of myself. This is a photo of me. I know you can't see me, but my name's Emily Patterson, and I run a small digital agency, and I specialize in helping nonprofits and government figure out how to track the data they need, set up all of that implementation work, and then use that data that they get. So be it creating dashboards, analyzing it, staff training, all sorts of different things. So if you need any help along those lines, my contact information is right here, emily@bmeasure.com, or find me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to take questions afterwards, and you're always welcome to reach out. So let's get it started. So the problem here, first off, I know that this is something that I face, and I think it's super common, is that digital content, just like clothes and a lot of other possessions, are a lot easier to get than to get rid of. There's something really enthralling about getting a new shirt or starting a new account, starting a new blog. There's that promise of the future that, okay, this is the time where I'm going to wear this style or this trend, or this is the time that, even we just had a new person start and she had this great idea. And so now we're going to launch this, new Instagram account where all of our users are going to share their photos from, coming to our programs. And it seems full of promise. And having to get rid of that is kind of, to acknowledge that my idea, my new trend or whatever didn't work out. And sometimes we hold on to that stuff for a lot longer than we should. So today we're going to talk about the life-changing magic of tidying up. I'm not a big self-help person, but I do really love this book, and I love the kind of minimalism trend that has come with it. So we're going to talk about how you can apply, this is my own mindset, to getting rid of some of this digital clutter. I think, obviously digital marketing, digital communications has been around for a long time now. And I think a lot of our organizations have collected all sorts of different, sections of the website, email lists, different things. We don't have the staff or capacity to keep up. They might have been the idea of a previous marketing director or, fundraising person. They may have been something left around from a time when you had more team or more funding, or you were running a particular program or initiative. Maybe you had a grant to promote, this specific, type of action, and that grant's no longer around. So what do you do with all of this content after it stops being useful? Well, today we're going to talk about the digital equivalent of taking things, to the consignment store or to Goodwill. All right, so the real recap before we get into the meat of the presentation. Today we're talking about, first off, I have a checklist. So I took a few prompts from Marie Kondo, put together my own list to figure out whether something sparks joy or not. Number two, so we decided that this content isn't worth saving, isn't worth keeping. So how do we say goodbye to it? And then number three, some ideas for if you do decide to get rid of your content, how do you keep writer's block at bay? How do you keep that going? Or you do decide to keep your content, how do you come up with enough new ideas to keep that blog, keep that email newsletter going? All right, to save or not to save? Isn't that the question? All right, so as I mentioned before a few times, if you've seen the show or read the book, this is Marie Kondo, and she has this idea that you should go through all the items in your house and touch them and see if they spark joy. This is a photo of this. If they do spark joy, it's okay, and you should keep them. That's obviously something you connect with, and you should hold on to it. So I have a different approach for figuring out whether your digital content, quote unquote, sparks joy. Because this is work, and your boss probably won't take too kindly to you saying, hey, our Facebook account doesn't spark joy anymore, I'm just going to delete it. I have a 4-part list that you can go through to evaluate whether or not all of this digital clutter makes sense for your organization to continue doing. So the quick overview, and we're going to go into each of these things in more detail, is number 1, does it align with your goals? So super high level. Number 2, do you have time to plan and execute it? This is more into the nitty gritty. Number 3, is your content unique? And number 4, is your audience reading it? All right. So I have a couple slides for each of these bullet points to explain in more detail what I mean. All right, number 1, does it align with your goals? So I think I throw this in here even though I think it seems obvious, and it should seem obvious to all of us watching this today. Like, duh, I'm not going to be doing something that doesn't impact my organization's mission or help us gain more support and donations. That doesn't make any sense. But I think especially with digital communications, digital marketing, it's really easy to get swept into the, hey, there's a new tool out there, there's a new platform out there mania. I think some of this is, there's a lot of people who are creative and they like technology, myself included, working in this field, and it's easy to want to try the latest thing and kind of keep up with what's going on out there. I think there's also certainly in different places I've worked, a lot of pressure coming from your CEO, your VP of communications, this sort of higher level position. Somebody went to a conference or they read an article or they talked to a friend that this is the cool new thing out there. In this case, it seems to be Pinterest. But I think as the people who are on the ground actually executing this, it's our responsibility to somehow take that energy and that desire to do something creative and make sure that it's helping us get to our goals. That before we start something new, make sure that this directly aligns with what we're trying to do, because that's exactly how we end up in a situation where we have all sorts of different things to keep up. You're writing 2 newsletters a week and you have 3 different social platforms, and then you're also having to produce 3 different articles for the website, and it's just not tenable. So be very clear about what this is and how it's going to help you get to your organization's goal. So just a super quick recap. What's a goal? So a goal is not, okay, we want to have this because everyone else has it. Social media and blogs and email can help create awareness of our organization or organization's mission. You want to spread the word about what it is you're doing and encouraging other people to do. You want to grow your conversion base, or you want to grow your donor base, or you want to grow other conversions. So it's not all about donations here. Maybe we want people to download research or sign up for an appointment or attend an event or join our email list. But there's a lot of different actions out there that we maybe want our audience to do. And then fair enough, along the same lines as increasing awareness, just growing traffic to your organization's website. That can be one of the ways that you measure whether you're really getting your message out there. All right, number 2 is a lot more tactical. So, when you're taking a look at your digital content and trying to decide whether you need to scale down, one of the more practical things you can look at is, do I actually have time to deal with this? I think this is something that I do. I love to create new things. I love to be creative. And a lot of times I don't think through very well what all goes into everything. So I have a habit of overcommitting myself. Like, sure, I can do that. That's no problem. So for me, it helps to make a list of, okay, what are all of the different nitty gritty details that go into, say, writing an article for the site. So it's not just writing it. It's also, you might need to interview some people. You might need to run the article by other people in your organization to see if they have any additional, edits or retweaks. You certainly need help proofreading. When you upload it to the website, you're going to have to format it and find images. And of course, there's SEO component. So there's just a lot more that goes into, say, in this example, writing an article for your site than just writing the article. That's really just one small part of it. It's really important to think all of this through, and maybe put it in a list, and be sure that you share this with your manager so that they're on board with. They understand all the things that go into stuff behind the scenes, because I think it's easy to not see that when you're in a high-level position. And one thing that I hear a lot from maybe previous jobs, maybe a little bit clients, is that, hey, it's cool, we can start a blog because we're going to get all of the program staff to contribute. It's cool that our communications team is really tapped for time, but they're not really going to have to write anything. We're going to ask all the people who are running the programs or doing our research or whatever to write blog posts for us. And that's great. And sometimes they do. But the thing is, doesn't really end up being less work, because you're going to have to go, rewrite their work. They're not really communications people. You're going to have to go back and forth with them on changes. A lot of times, you might tweak their language and they don't like it. So there's just a lot involved there too. So don't let your CEO, your VP of communications or marketing, sell you on a newsletter or a blog or whatever with the idea that the other staff in the organization are going to be writing it, because I've never really seen it work out exactly like that. All right, number 3 is your content unique? So, right, we got, do you have time to plan and execute it? Does it help you accomplish your goals? The next thing that I think you may have not really thought of is, is it something unique that your organization can offer? So this example came from a friend of mine who works at UVA Health System, and they have a blog there that they've put a lot of time into, and she realized that a lot of her posts that were kind of more generic, such as, do I have the flu? What are my flu symptoms? Weren't getting much traffic. And really the reason for that was that everybody else is writing about this, is offering very general content that users could find elsewhere from, of course, UVA is a reputable hospital and is providing good information, but there's kind of established medical sites like cdc.gov and WebMD, which are the top sources here that people are already going to for information and likely to click on at the top of the search results. So, she found that, this having a blog, if it just has this sort of generic content, is just not very helpful. That, it's unlikely to get any traffic, and it's unlikely to really add much value to the people in the community that they're trying to target. So if your blog, your email, or whatever is, doesn't really have a strong point of view and isn't really offering unique content, that might be a good reason to, discontinue it, or at least change the focus. All right. Number 4, the last one here, is your audience reading it? So, we looked at whether it's unique. This is kind of similar. You want to take a look at whether this content is bringing in people who are valuable to your organization, and not just random people who are finding you through search. This is Thomas Jefferson. I live down here in Charlottesville, Virginia, where Thomas Jefferson lives. So I feel a little bad for him every time I put this picture up. But, it may say in the Declaration, Constitution of it. Oh, shoot. Anyway, he's definitely said that that all men are created equal. But in the case of web content, that's not really true. We have people who find our websites. Pretty much every site I've ever worked on, there'll be one or two pieces that get really well indexed in search, and you'll get a lot of traffic from search users. And a lot of times those pieces don't really have much to do with the rest of the content or the organization's mission. It might be a piece. I'm just working with a client now who has an article on their site about how many people have ever lived in all of time. And it's a fun piece, but it doesn't really have much to do with their mission as a whole. And the people who come there are probably people who are just, maybe at dinner with friends, and, someone has raised this question and now they want a quick answer to kind of settle, maybe a dispute. So it's not really their target audience. And you want to make sure that your content that you're producing, your social media, your emails, that these are the people, these really resonate with the people we're trying to reach. So not just web content in general. And figuring this out for yourself uses one of my favorite features of Google Analytics, and a way I do a lot of my analysis for clients. So I have a Brita filter here, and basically I'm going to create in Google Analytics what Google Analytics calls an advanced segment. So if you want more information about this, advanced segment is the term that you're going to Google. So what you're doing here is you're basically creating a filter on your account, and you're looking at just traffic that meets that criteria. So we got all these different types of content: the careers content, the about content, visitor info. I think I made this originally for a museum. But we're going to instead look at just everything that is under /blog. So this is what it would look like. This is a screenshot here. So you just click on this add segment, and this panel down here unfolds. So look for this button up here. So this is the easiest way to do this. But if your blogs, if you're looking at another section of your website, say you have content around a specific subject, you might have to do something different. This would be the easiest scenario. So basically you're going down to conditions, and then we want page, so like URL, contains, and then whatever is the subdirectory there that's going to connect all of the different pages together. All right, so this is a little part of an analysis that I did for a client around their blog, kind of looking at the same thing, that their blog had been kind of waning, a bit hard to get people to contribute. They had some turnover in their communications team, and it was the staff was having a hard time keeping up with it. So we wanted to know, is this really useful to our users? And for them, the answer was yes. That on average, people were spending a little less than 3 minutes and visiting only a couple of pages. But the blog readers were super engaged. They were spending up to 5 minutes and reading over 4 pages each. So they weren't just reading one article on the blog. They weren't just like that other client where people were coming to find one answer and then going away. They were looking at, they were staying, reading that article, reading other content, really more involved with the site than your average reader. So I think that's a good indication that your blog content is appealing to your core audience here, your people who are really engaged, not the people who are Googling something because their friend asked them a silly question. All right, so to recap, before we move on to the next thing, here's the list again. So the first two, I think, are pretty obvious. We want to make sure that anything you're doing aligns with your larger organizational goals. Don't let your CEO get you off track because she saw something cool at a conference once. Number two, Don't be me. Make sure you think all about all of the different types of work and different people involved in actually running these accounts. And then 3 and 4 is your content unique. You want to make sure you're offering something special to your audience that's not already out there. And there's a lot already out there. And is your audience reading it? Are you attracting the people who are really your core, I hate to say audience again, audience here, or is it just random people finding your site? Are these really the people you want to be targeting? And some analysis for how to do that. All right. So we took a look at whether or not you should say goodbye. So how to figure out in a very logical manner here whether something sparks joy and should be kept. And if you decide to keep it, this is some techniques you can use in getting rid of it. So you have a few different options here. And I think it really depends which one you pick, a lot of times which type of platform it's on. We're going to talk about this. All right, so the first technique I'm going to talk about is, I think, probably the first one that comes to mind, and it's really communicating with your audience that something is going to be changing. So it's kind of the equivalent of putting up a, we're closed, we're out of business sign. So I think you want to do this a lot. In thinking about this and having given this talk a couple of times, you're going to do this most often with social media. So the reason that is because you don't own your social media lists. So if you started a social media account for I used to work for PBS, and we had on occasion started social media accounts for shows. If the show gets canceled or just runs its course after a few seasons, you're going to be in this situation where, all right, we're not going to be updating. That show doesn't exist anymore. We don't have the capacity to continue running these accounts. So we're going to have to tell our fans that we're shutting down. Because unfortunately, we don't own their email addresses or any way to contact them outside of this page. So it's not like we can just roll them over to a new account or put them on another list. So if you're going to close your social media accounts, you want to make sure you tell people at least 30 days in advance and tell them where else they can find and contact you. So be sure to provide them a message and point them to another page or another list or something else where they can go to get similar information. And this is another sample post from my friend at UVA Hospital. So similar to the example at PBS, they were unable, they had to discontinue a special program section of their website, and along with that, the social media account that went with it. And so they posted this, pinned it to the top, and told people where else to find them if they needed this content. So I think when it comes to social media, this is really the best you can do and the best way to handle it. You want to make sure that if people are still interested in you, they come and find you somewhere else. You don't want to lose those followers. However, in other cases, I think it's totally okay to ghost. Obviously it's not polite to ghost people in a dating situation or a professional situation. You don't want to just disappear. However, in a web content and email situation, I think it can be okay. All right, so here's an example from one client. This is the same people who had the slide from before. It's a national, one of the federal government agencies that deals with museums and libraries. And thank you very much for allowing me to share your content here. But in a previous communications department, they had a lot of they I guess had an idea, this predates me, to, let's create all of these specialized areas, different email lists where people can sign up for exactly what they want. Well, it's a great idea. It's very cool that, if you're just interested in STEM or you're just interested in community, you can get emails just about those specific topics. The issue is, in a communications team with 2.5 people, there's not the staff power to produce all of this content. That people had signed up, and some of them, if they were on issues that weren't really covered very much, had never gotten an email from this department. So I helped the agency, clean up this list. I worked with the staff to figure out, okay, we're going to combine some of these into, what we feel confident, what we are currently offering. And it ended up being 4 lists. And I did sort of not ghost the people. Pretty much if you had signed up for something where you had not received an email from the organization in 6 months or more, I didn't want people to be surprised. Like, who is this? I never signed up for this list. So I did email those people and ask them to opt back in. But for other people who had registered more recently or had signed up for a list that had been active, they just got moved on to the appropriate new list. I think, as long as the experience for people isn't really changing and they did opt into, this is in line with what they opted into, it's okay to just sort of, move their email basically from one list to another. You don't want them to have a radically different experience, and you don't want them to just suddenly start receiving 3 emails a week from us when we had never sent them anything for 2 years. Like, that's not going to be cool. But I think sometimes, over communication can actually be more confusing. All right. I think one more point with this is, I think this sort of technique of merging lots of little sections into, just 1 or 2, or in this case 4 bigger sections, also plays a lot with web content. I've definitely worked places where, maybe there were multiple blogs or outlets on the site for different programs. Like maybe we had one section where the policy team wrote about new policies, and you had the program team, took pictures from their different events, and then you had, something else from, a fundraising or communications team that talked more broadly about the organization, and they each only updated, once every other month. A good technique to deal with that would be to merge those 3 sections into one. This would be another place where you could just redirect the old sections to this new format. And, then even if people are updating only once a month or every other month, you're now having a lot more people contribute to that one section, so it looks a lot more active. And I think this is another place where you don't necessarily need to communicate to your fellows that these previous pages are going defunct. As far as they know, they will type in the same URL and be taken to a new place that has a lot more additional content, but also the same content. So I think that's, when it comes to web content and when it comes to sections of your site that are not being frequently updated, I think redirecting them to a more active place is a really good solution. All right, and the last section today is keeping writer's block at bay with data, my favorite thing. So we're going to look at some techniques. If you decided that, okay, I'm going to roll these newsletters into one big one, or I'm, kind of sunsetting some of the least, the old social media accounts and keeping just one main account. Well, this is how you can use your data to come up with new ideas for what you can be writing about. And I know that I've brought up this organization a few times, but this is the Museum and Library Services. So this is the Library and Museums Federal Agency that I've been using a lot of examples from. This is their homepage. And like I said before, they have blog, and it's, in a good place right now. When I came on board originally about a year ago, they were having a hard time keeping up with it because of staff changes and other factors, and they were interested in kind of getting an idea about what's been popular, what can we write about, how can we focus. So I did this analysis for them. So here's 3 things that you can do, and the first one is going to be very easy, and the second 2 require a little bit of setup. So this is basically how you can use some Google Analytics data to get ideas for what you can write about on your blog, but I also think that this will carry over to social media content and email and other things that you have going on. All right, so the easiest thing you can do, and I recommend taking a look at this, is go into Google Analytics, go under its behavior, and then it's going to be top pages, and just pull your top pages from your blog. You might have to filter for pages containing blog or something like that. I would say pull a year's worth of data and just kind of see if anything pops out at you. So I wanted to add the caveat here. I think this is analysis, a report worth doing, but I think what you need to keep in mind when you look at this report, and that's why some of these are bolded and others aren't, is that blog content that's going to be promoted, so if you're pushing it heavily through email or through search or on your homepage, that's automatically going to do better. You're going to get more traffic from those pieces. So you don't want to look at something and say, hey, all articles about museums in Nebraska did really well. Well, it's because, those museums in Nebraska were emailing this out to their list of, 50,000 people, and that's why they got more clicks. So it's important to take a look at the list, but also keep in mind the cause and effects behind it. And I'm going to give you some ideas now about how you can look kind of beyond just the promotion and how things got more traffic just because of that. All right, so even better than just pulling this top list, I do recommend it as a good place to start, is to set up tracking for search on your site. So you might say, hey, what does this have to do with content? But first, before I get to that, you can do this because you can easily go into your admin section in Google Analytics. I forget off the top of my head exactly where this is, but if you Google it, you'll be able to find it pretty easily. And so pretty much when we're talking about search, on-site search here. So this is going to be this search this website bar that pretty much every website has. We want to set up tracking for this. Pretty much all you have to do is enter in your query parameter here. So when you type it in a search, so say we're going to look for program, you're going to type in program, and when you hit enter, it's going to take you to a new page, and that page is going to have it'll probably say it'll say the URL, and then it'll say S or another little term there, equals, and then it will have your search keyword. So what comes before that equal sign is what you want to put in here. Google will automatically be able to track what people are searching for. And why is this useful? So I think this is a gold mine of ideas for blog posts. This is the same again, some data pulled from the IMLS website. So it just shows you kind of what this looks like. I actually put this into a word cloud so that people could read it more easily. But this is both, I think, what your users want to see on your website. This is what they expect from you. You might already have content about this, and if you do, it might mean that there's a usability problem and people can't find it. But I think it's also a great place to monitor to see if new things are coming up, as the seasons change or whatever. And, get ideas for what people are looking for, what they expect for you as far as content goes. So it's a great place to look. And another great place to look, I think, is to, in addition to looking at top pages, right, we also want to look at okay, a lot of people were coming to these posts. Which posts are people actually reading? So to combine both elements to get a better idea about both what's popular and then what's engaging. So to do this, I pulled a list of the top posts. This is similar to the one a few slides back. And I also looked at which post had the most people scrolling down to the bottom, as a measure for reading it. And I took a look at, okay, this post was the number one on both lists. It was both had a lot of page views, and it also had a lot of people reading all the way to the end. Like, this is obviously, a popular subject and a engaging article. The rest of the stuff, a lot of the things that showed up here that weren't on the other list were a lot of case study sort of content. This public library serving children with autism, growing early learning initiatives in Wisconsin. So this was more specific, detailed information from one library or one museum, one person writing about their experience and what their organization did. So I think that's a very practical, sort of hands-on case study sort of content that people were really reading to the bottom of. And if you want to set this up on your website, of course, you're welcome to reach out to me. It's something that I do for clients, but it's also something to be done through Google Tag Manager. And if you're interested in learning about Google Tag Manager, I did a webinar about it last month. So go ahead and check that out on my site. All right, to summarize, we're getting here to the end. Key takeaways, so if you forget everything else, the big things I wanted you to remember from this is, I know it's obvious, but in a field where there's so much new and there's so much cool happening, be sure that you evaluate everything through the lens of, is this helping us achieve our goals? Take a look at it that way, and then decide if it's a cool thing. The other thing is, this is my own advice from my own self, is really think about the time involved before you commit to something, or whether you're trying to decide whether to stop doing it. Something that's very time consuming and involves a lot of people, it's going to make it harder to be worth doing. So really, really figure that out, incorporate that into your decision about whether to spring clean away something. So this presentation looked at a couple of different ways that you can use data to make decisions and guide your strategy. I know that a lot of people, I hear from a lot of clients who, it's like they have Google Analytics set up on their site. They just struggle to figure out how to use that data to make decisions to guide their strategy. And I hope these were a couple of very concrete techniques, easy things that you can do, help you figure out, like, okay, what's really working, what's worth doing more of in the future. All right, that's everything for today. If you want to get a hold of me, this is my contact information. Hold on, let me put this slide back up here, and then I'm happy to take any questions. All right, okay, we have, yes, I want to say that these slides, someone asking about the slides will be available. I will post them on my website, and I'm going to send out a link with this information to everyone who signed up for the webinar. All right, another question. So this person says they have a boss who is very enthusiastic. And this is something I talk about a lot, about starting new social accounts and new content on the site. How do I convince her that we shouldn't always start new things? So I think this is a really tough one, and this is more of a personality managing up situation than it really is about content. I have had good luck, and I do have another webinar about this, about using data to kind of deal with different personality types. That it's not about saying no, it's kind of about kind of redirecting that energy. Like, okay, I hear what you're saying, that this is a really cool idea. We need to be an organization that's seen as a leader in, social media or whatever. We want to be seen as more cutting edge. It's like to redirect that into how can we accomplish that same thing by not necessarily creating new work, like taking something that we're already doing and reshaping it in some sort of way, or perhaps, stopping something else. So I think it's important in this situation where you have this very enthusiastic person to not be seen as the naysayer that might just create problems, create conflict in your office. All right. Okay. I think that's everything for today. And I want to give a quick plug for next month's webinar. This is March, so it's going to be April, and we're going to take a look at measuring your grants. So this is something I've been doing increasingly more of. If you are a person who works on grants, you might be getting a lot of pushback from your officers to provide data on how actionable, what sort of results you're getting. So we're going to take a look at hopefully a couple of different case studies from things I've done and get you some ideas for how you can use Google Analytics and digital tools to track your success and get ideas for improvement. Great. Well, thank you all for coming out. This has been lovely, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions at all.